Okay, I have nothing at the top. I'm mindful of the time, and I will jump around to people who have not yet gotten questions, but I will start with Alex, if you want to kick us off.
I have three questions. First, on inflation. Brian talked a lot about needing to address snares in the supply chain, but you all have taken quite a few of those steps, and we're still seeing high inflation, shortages on shelves. So is this an issue that shows the sort of limitations of the presidency and the executive branch? Is this an issue that the president simply can't solve?
I think what it shows, and you heard Brian talk about this a bit, is that it's a multi-pronged challenge. And he talked about, obviously, the steps we're taking to address supply chain challenges. And there's no question those have been impacted by the pandemic, have also been impacted by a huge increase of demand and retail purchases online that we saw across the course of the fall. So that is one challenge that we've been attacking head on. We also know that there are specific industries like the auto industry that accounts for about 1/3 of what we're seeing in terms of inflationary increases and price increases. And if you look at the purchases of cars, one of the biggest issues there is chips and the lack of manufacturing capacity here in the United States. Of course, that's been impacted by a range of issues, including the pandemic, but one of the things that we have been advocating for and pushing for is for Congress to move forward in taking steps to support and bolster our competitiveness here. That includes over $50 billion in funding for chips manufacturing. I would also say that that would also help ensure that manufacturing in the future is the capacity is increased here at home, so we're less dependent on the global supply chain around the world. So I think what it speaks to, Alex, a good question, is the multi-pronged components that impact the supply chain, that impact price increases that people have seen, the American public has seen across the country.
Do you have an update on how the Iran talks are going over the JCPOA?
Sure.
Is the administration satisfied with how they're going?
So I know there's been a lot going on. This has certainly been happening. Right now, what's happening is on Monday, January 3rd, the 8th round of negotiations commenced in Vienna, and those are ongoing. And what we're looking at and how what we would like to remind the public of is why we are at this point now. Most importantly, none of the things we're looking at now, Iran's increased capability and capacity, their aggressive actions that they have taken through proxy wars around the world would be happening if the former president had not recklessly pulled out of the nuclear deal with no thought as to what might come next. And if you look at that step and the impact of that, the fact that the former president ripped at the nuclear deal meant that Iran's nuclear program was no longer in a box, no longer had the most robust inspection regime ever negotiated, no longer had the tight restrictions on nuclear activity. And so now where we're at, even as these negotiations are ongoing, and as we conveyed back in December, that we were a bit frustrated by the lack of seriousness that negotiators came to the table. They've come back, and now we're back at the table again, as I noted. But because of the last administration pulling out of the nuclear agreement, now Iran's program has been rapidly accelerating. Iran directly attacked our partners in the Gulf, and its proxies began attacking U.S. troops again in Iraq. And the United States had become totally isolated internationally. So what we've been working to do is rebuild those relationships, our partnerships with countries around the world, get back to the table so we can have that increased capacity and ability to see what is happening with the program. But right now the negotiations are ongoing, and we're, of course, eager to see the diplomatic path move forward.